This scripture, 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 11.
Welcome to the radio broadcast of Bethesda Household of Prayer, where Elder Donald R. Jones is pastor. We want you to open your hearts and your minds as you feed on God's Word. Brought to you today by Pastor Donald R. Jones. Here is Pastor Jones.
Upon moral fiber, where you stand in times of crises, how you function on a daily basis. You see, we can't measure a man by how successful he is in business. We have to measure a man about how successful he is at home. Business success and home success are two different things. You see, there's a difference between reputation and character. I'm quite sure most of us are familiar with that. Reputation is what people think about you. And all of us are good at portraying and rejecting a false reputation, what we want people to actually think about us. Character is who your wife and children think you are. Character is who your wife and your children think you are. And I'm quite sure most of us never really grapple with that as men. We rarely grapple with the difference between our reputation, what people think about us, because we're good at projecting that we are providers, that we are good lovers, that we're good friends, that we're good providers. But oh, when you get in that house, and how you treat your wife and your children, how you provide for your wife and your children, how you treat your wife, that's character. And we have to sit back and we have to get back and start realizing that even in a marital relationship, there's a difference between sex and sensitivity. Men deal with sex, women deal with sensitivity. And you gotta come to the realization that a marriage is not gonna always be this romantic affair. We would like it to be that way, but it's not gonna always be that way. They're gonna have children, they're gonna have things that's gonna happen in their relationship, they're gonna have things that's gonna start occupying that time. And how you deal with those things determine what type of man you are. And it's so important for us to realize this because what we display and what we do have a tremendous impact on children. Do you know that if there's a loving, caring, godly father in the family, that child has a 75% chance of coming to know and love and respect God? And if there's no loving, God-fearing man in the family, that child has less than a 25% of coming to know God and respecting God and understanding that moral fiber counts. And that's why it's so important for us to understand, will a real man stand up? So we got a false definition of man. If you chilled, you got this six-pack, you're handsome, you're debonair, you crack a good joke, you can make people laugh. We say that's a good man. That's what other people see. But what's in the inside of you? And that's why it's so important for you and I that God is looking for good men. Remember when Israel got ready to go into the promised land? And God paused. As they got ready to cross that river, God paused, and God told Joshua in Joshua 5:2, he said, take out a flint knife for yourself and circumcise the sons of Israel again the second time. What God was saying is that this promise, this blessing that I have for you, this wonderful thing that I've been promising you that's about to manifest itself, you need to be re-sanctified because you don't really understand it. And God is telling us as men today, we need to be sanctified. The blessings that he has for us, these unprecedented blessings that he has for us. God has said, I've been preparing you for these blessings. So you need to re-sanctify yourself. You need to rededicate yourself. You need to rededicate yourself to me. You need to rededicate yourself to your family. You need to rededicate yourself to your community. You need to re-sanctify yourself. You need to start showing that moral character, that integrity, that thing will set you apart. You see, that circumcision was to separate the Israelites, men, from other men. That circumcision was it went to your private parts, the secret things. So it was designed to separate the Israelite men from other men, to allow those men to stand out. And God is saying to us today as men, it's time for you to stand up and stand out. It's time for you to be that special person. Re-sanctify yourself. Re-sanctify yourself so those unprecedented blessings that I've been waiting for you to get, they're there for you. God is saying to us as men, it's time for us to stop saying, boys will be boys. It's just in our nature. God is saying to you and I, there's a need for re-sanctification in our hearts, in our eyes, in our mind, in our spirits. God is saying, I want you to be a little bit pure. I want that blessing that I've been promising to manifest itself in your life. He's saying to you and I, will a real man stand up? He's saying those little secrets, those little things that has stopped you from having a pure heart, a pure mind, a relieved spirit, come to me, bring it to me, and re-sanctify yourself and allow yourself to be that pure vessel that I can use so I can give you those unprecedented blessings that I promise you. Those things that are not manifesting themselves in your life today. God is saying, I have prepared something great for you that is unparalleled, is huge, is big, is beyond anything that you can begin to comprehend. But he's telling us that if we are not prepared for it, if we don't re-sanctify ourselves, if we don't put ourselves in a position whereby his light can shine through us, where we can be a lamp that attract other people, then we're going to miss out on that blessing. Do you know there were some people who missed out on the blessing of going into the promised land? Yeah, a whole lot of people missed out on that because their hearts were not where it was supposed to be. You see, when your heart is not where it's supposed to be, you're going to miss out on your blessing. And what happens is that God might just let it just pass right by you. He might let it pass right by you because we aren't where we need to be as men. We got a false perception of what it means to be a man. You notice that when on the Passover, remember that Passover in the Bible? The men went and put blood on the door. And then the dead angel didn't stop there. So remember that. There's another Passover that I think helps illustrate what we're dealing with today. Because our families are in crisis. Do you know that our families are in crisis? You see, Satan is attacking the family. Go to Ezekiel chapter 9, verses 4 and 6. Ezekiel chapter 9, verse 4 and 6. Satan is attacking families. Because you know what Satan believes? If I could destroy the family, if I could destroy the marriage, if I could destroy the community, then I got what I want. And what God is saying to you and I, that he needs strong men. He needs men who are going to be praying. He needs men who are going to be worshiping. He needs men who are going to step up and be a man. Ezekiel 9:4. Watch this. And I think this sort of illustrates it for us. And the Lord said to him, go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, and put a mark on the forehead of the men who sigh and cry over all the abominations that are done within. God is saying right there, I need God-fearing men. I need God discerning men. I need men who are going to cry out for the abominations that are happening in their home, that's happening in the church, that's happening in the community. All those abominations, all those things that are destroying the family. I need men who are going to stand up and be bold and cry out to me about these things and let me know that their heart is pure. And all these abominations that are going on around them, that they're not going to be a part of it. They're not going to participate in it. Look what he says. Keep going. Verse number 5. Then the other he says in my hearing, go after him through the city and kill, and do not let your eyes spare, nor have any pity. Utterly slay old and young men, maidens and little children and women. But watch this. But do not come near anyone on whom is the mark, and begin at the sanctuary. You see what he's saying there? He's saying that those men who are men, those men who stand up, those men who cry out, those men who have spiritual discernment, those men who are praying, those men who are studying God's word, those men who stand up, your family is not going to be a target by the destroyer. That destroyer who is coming is not going to get your family. He's saying, I need men of God to cry out. I need men of God to stand up. I need men of God to say, my family is not going to be caught by the destroyer. And God is saying, look, this is a new Passover that you can now holler out, you can now pray out, you can say that God, I want to be where I need to be spiritually, so my family is not a target. God is saying that don't depend on the pastor to be the spiritual leader of your home. God is saying, men, stand up and be the spiritual leader of your home. He's saying, men, start praying, start worshiping. You see, when your children see you, your children and your grandchildren and your nieces and your nephews, when they see you praying, when they see you worshiping God, then they got something to follow. They got something to understand. But when they don't see you doing it, how do you expect them to do it? How do you expect them to understand it? How do you expect it to be a part of their life? Well, God is saying to you and I, as Satan is targeting your house, you need to be the spiritual leader of your home. Stop depending on your wife to get up in the morning at 5 o'clock and read the Bible. That's a good thing. Stop depending on your wife to be praying all the time, to be worshiping. God is saying it's time for men to stop being secondary in the life of the family. He's saying it's time for us to stand up. We get stuck on stupid. We start dealing with things sometimes that don't even make sense. We're arguing about is the tithe in the Old Testament and New Testament. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Because where God guides, he's going to provide. Where God guides, he's going to provide. We get caught on the silliest things. We are laying home deciding, should I stay home and watch TV or should I go to church and fellowship with other believers? Yes. New Orleans Talk Network, Facebook, Twitter, and everywhere where this program is broadcast, it's not a substitute for you worshiping with believers. When you can't come to the body of believers, you can go on New Orleans Talk Network and look at this service. You can go on Facebook and Twitter. But this is not a substitute to be amongst the house of believers, praising and worshiping the Lord. You see in the book of Acts, we're studying the book of Acts now in Bible study. They came together as a body of believers. God is saying to you and I, it's time for discerning men to step up. It's time for men to come through that rite of passage. It's time for men to stop being boys. What do you mean by that, Pastor? You leave home 6 o'clock in the morning to go to work, which is a good thing. You get off work around 5 o'clock. Instead of going home to be with your wife and your children, you stop at the corner store. And you stay at the corner store and you hang out with your buddies and you drink beer or whatever you want to drink or Coke, whatever you're doing, and you stay there to 8:30, 8:45 at night. And then you come home at 9 o'clock, all you want to do is take a bath, eat, and go to sleep. Is that being a man? No. You putting the thing that God has yoked you to and the family that God has allowed you to have, you putting it second. Why in the world, as a man, you get off from work, you want to go hang out for 3 hours at the store and drink beer? That's crazy. You finished your project at work, and instead of going home, you find things at work to hang out on. And then you get home at 9, 10 o'clock. And then you expect your wife to stop everything she's doing and deal with your needs. Something's wrong with that. Something is wrong with that. That lady know that you left 6 o'clock at that morning. She know you coming there at 9:30. What if she's taking care of the kids? She's prepared the food. She's done everything. Now she's heartbroken because you come scrambling in at 9:30, wanting her to stop everything she's doing and deal with your nonsense. God is saying to you and I, it's time for us to stand up. It's time for us to demonstrate a commitment to God, a commitment to family, a commitment to community. And then our children and our grandchildren and our nieces and our nephews can see in us the light that could change them. We got to stop being children. We have to rededicate ourselves to God. People got to be able to see that we have a humongous relationship with God. We have an amazing relationship with God. We have a fundamental relationship with God that takes precedence over everything else. And you know what's going to happen? You're going to find there's going to be more joy, there's going to be more peace, there's going to be more relaxation, there's going to be more harmony in your life, in your relationship, in your family, in your community. It starts at home with us as men. God did not make the woman the head of the household. God did not make the woman responsible for providing for the men. You know, it breaks my heart sometimes. The church is affiliated with a nonprofit that provides housing for people. And they provide housing, and these young girls, they move into the apartment with 1 or 2 kids. And they get a subsidized apartment. And then you go in there to spray for roaches or go in there to change the filter every 30 days, and all you see is men at home 11 o'clock in the day watching The Young and the Restless. There's not a man on the application. And there's nothing wrong with you moving a man into your home. If God has grafted you to a man, there's nothing wrong with that. But why not put him on the application? Why not put him on the application? There was a young lady called me about 2 weeks ago. They were about to put her out the apartment complex. Pastor Jones, I need your help. They're about to put me out. Well, why are they putting you out? Well, I had a fight with my boyfriend. Okay? And when the police came, and I made him leave. Then he wanted to take the big screen TV off the wall. He wanted to take the sofa set. So I had to call the manager. And the police asked him, were you on the lease? And the manager said, no, he's not on the lease. Then what is your TV doing here? What is your living room set? Well, I live here. That lady, that particular young lady, works 2 jobs. That man was home that day. And when she came home, he was angry about something. He just started fighting her. And what I'm saying to you is that we got to get to the realization where these young ladies got to stop allowing men to pimp them. You working, You got 2, 3 kids, he's staying home all day. Something is fundamentally wrong with that. Something is fundamentally wrong with that. And it's not the abnormality, it has become normal. And God is saying to you and I, it's time for us to stop acting as children. Going back to 1 Corinthians 13 and 11. God makes it plain and clear. And see, when God pins something, don't doubt it. When God says it, don't doubt it. When God brings it into your life, trust it. When you look at 1 Corinthians 13 and 11, look what it says. It's time for men to grow up. It's time for men to assume their responsibilities. Because if you don't, the destroyer is going to target your family. And there's no need whining and crying once the destroyer targets your family, because God tells you what to do. He says, when I was a child, I spoke as a child. Stop acting like a child. You're 44 years old, and you're still acting like a child. You don't understand that woman needs sensitivity. Why hang out at the corner store when you can go home for 6 o'clock? You can help her cook the food. You can help her with the kids with their homework. And then you and she can take a nice shower and go to bed and do what husband and wives do. But you expect her to work all day, take care of the kids, and then you flop there at 9:30 and say, I want my manly rights. You got to be crazy. You got to be crazy. You see, it's in the sensitivity. It's in helping her wash the dishes. It's in helping her help the kids study. It's you connecting. There's sensitivity. There's a bond. There's a unity. So she's going to tell you, honey, let's go take a shower together. When I was a child, I spoke as a child. I understood as a child. Stop basing your actions on childish things. Stop acting like a child. God is saying for you and I, it's time for men to stand up and be counted. Stop acting like a child. I want this. I want that. I'm not willing to put anything into it to get it. I'm not willing to prepare for it. I just want it. That's what children do. I want. Can I have? God is saying to you and I, stop understanding like a child. You gotta spend some time reading God's word. You know, read the book of Ecclesiastes. Read the book of Psalms. Read these things so you can see and understand and appreciate what your role is as a man. Read Proverbs so you can get some wisdom and some understanding, so you don't keep making the same foolish mistakes over again. You want change, but you want to keep doing things the same way. Keep doing them the same way, you'll get the same result. Stop thinking as a child. Read the book of Psalms. It's going to help you to stop thinking like a child. It's going to help you to start thinking like an adult. So what Paul is telling us, stop understanding things from a child. You got all these responsibilities, and you're a man and you acting like a child because you think like a child. Because your life is centered around you and what you want and what you need. And God is saying to you and I, when I became a man, I put away childish things. Look at the both wins in there. It's a transition there. He's saying, when I was a child, it was all right to act like a child. But when I became a man, it became time to act as a man, to demonstrate moral character, to demonstrate integrity, to demonstrate the ability to provide, to demonstrate a relationship with Christ that's not superseded by anything else. You see, when you accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, profess it with your mouth and believe it with your heart, there's a metamorphosis that happens. You start to understand unconditional love. You start to be able to give your wife and your children unconditional love. You start to make them the second most important thing in your life. Not your boys hanging out at the bar. And there's nothing wrong with going to the bar every now and then and getting a drink if that turns you on. But that shouldn't be your priority. When I get off from work, I got to go hang out at the store and drink beer and alcohol with my boys for 3 hours. God is saying, put away childish things. Don't have a protracted childhood. He's telling you and I to grow up. He's telling you and I to mature. He's telling you and I to be fathers, because what's happening is that the destroyer is targeting our family. And if we don't know how to pray, if we don't know how to worship, if we don't know how to cry out, just like it says to us in the book of Ezekiel that we just read, your family is going to be on the losing end. That's what God is saying to you and I. That it's time for men to stand up. It's time for men to touch the family and touch it through a relationship with Jesus Christ. There's one of the largest, I hear people talk about this all the time. And as I was preparing, I saw this in a book I was reading. It talks about Kruger National Park in South Africa. It's one of the largest reserves in the world. Have all kind of animals there. But what they found was that the elephants, the baby elephants, started to eat all the vegetation. They just started eating it all. So they decided that they were going to take 300 of these elephants and they were going to move them to another park in South Africa called Humaga Forestry Reserve. And it was about 300 miles away from Kruger National Park. So when they brought these elephants to this reserve, at this reserve there's a white rhino. Now the white rhino doesn't have any natural enemies because it's big, it's fierce, it's strong. People don't mess around with it. But then they started to notice that these white rhinos, they started finding them dead all over. So they wondered what was going on. So they put cameras in the park to observe it. And as they observed it, they saw something unique starting to happen. These baby rhinos that they had taken from the Kruger National Reserve and put in this other reserve, guess what they started to do? They started to form gangs and packs. And they started to kill the rhino, the white rhino, which normally could defend itself. Now, on our streets, every day, all over the United States, we hear about murders and killings. And we attribute a lot of it to gangs. And I want to suggest to you that some of the reasons why we've had this proliferation of gangs and the killings that we see is similar to what happens to those baby elephants. You see, when they took those baby elephants from the Kruger Reserve to bring it to the other reserve, they had no mature elephants to show them how to live. They had no mature elephants to show them how to act. So they started to form packs and they started to do whatever they felt that they should do. And I think that's what's happening on our streets today. Because these young men don't have mature, godly men to speak into their lives. They don't have mature, godly men to let them know that this behavior is unacceptable. And just like those elephants those baby elephants, remember they were baby, they were baby elephants. But they started to form gangs and packs, and they started to kill the white rhino, which is one of the most vicious animals in the reserve. As a matter of fact, that's why they sort of have them along to themselves. And God is telling you and I that if we want to see these behavior changes, if we want to see some of this killing stop, if we want to see some of this gang violence stop, he's telling you and I that these young men need mature, discerning men in their lives, men of God who can speak right and wrong into their lives, because the women can't do it by themselves. Because there's a physiological and biological difference between a woman and a man. Well, Pastor, what do you mean by that? I've heard women say to me, I don't need no man. All I need is a sperm bank when I get ready. Yeah, that's real. You see, you can sit out there and act like you don't hear this. You can put your head in the ground like what did the animal that put the head in the ground? An ostrich. You can put your head in the ground like an ostrich and pretend that all this stuff don't exist, but it exists. And if we don't talk about it in the house of God, where are we going to talk about it at? I've actually heard women tell me that I don't need no man. All I need is a sperm bank. You see, the irony of that is that when you put money in the bank, you get interest. As a matter of fact, whenever I got some money to put in the bank, I want compound interest. So I don't understand why somebody can say, all I need is a sperm bank, and you're not getting interest and you're not getting compound interest. All you're getting is all the responsibilities. Think about that. Think about that. You know why? Because there's a significant difference between men and women. Let's just talk about it a little bit. Most of us are aware that the woman produces what you call the X chromosome. The man produces the X and the Y chromosome. As a matter of fact, the man determines the physical identity of that child. If the man gives an X, it's a girl. If the man gives the Y, it's a boy. Now, this is my question to you. If that's in the physical world, what about the spiritual world? So when we're allowing the woman to raise the child by themselves, we're depriving that child of its true identity. We don't want to deal with it. That's okay. Because what happens is that child needs to have a mature, discerning male, a spiritual male in their life, so that XY chromosome makes sense to them. Because there's biological changes that happen. You see, do you realize that when that child is conceived, that child has you don't know if it's a male or a female? And then a few days after that child is conceived, or appointed when that child is conceived, this fluid called testosterone passes over those brain membranes, and it sort of disconnects some of them. And that determines the psychological aspect of that child with that identity. If it's a male child, it sort of disconnects some of the membranes, and that's why we kind of like brain damage from birth. Do you know that we brain damage from birth? That's what you mean by that. Because ladies have the capacity to use the left and right side of their brain. It's like radar. Because that testosterone did not disconnect it. Men can only use one side of their brain at a time. So ladies have the capacity, like radar, to determine things that we cannot see and understand. But men have the ability to be able to do things from a more logical, pragmatic perspective because of the side of the brain that they use. We use the left side more than the right. So in a relationship, in a family, if that is biologically what's happening, then what's happening spiritually with the lack of the man's presence in that child's life? That's why it's so important that we come together as fathers and we help raise this generation of children that need both the father and the mother, because they are differences between what a woman can do and what a man can do. I'm not talking about physically. men are physically stronger because we have more blood, and we have our blood. We have like maybe 5 points or a quarter blood, and woman has like 4/5. So, and it's the blood that gives us more strength. But what I'm saying to you is simply this: you need both the man and the woman to raise a child, because men have the capacity to teach that child wrong and right. Notice that a child will respect a discerning man. You can see a man out in the street, and if that man is a godly man, that man is a discerning man, that child will respect that man. That child will treat that man differently. And that's why it's so important that we realize that there's a difference between women and men, and God is asking for a generation of men to stand up and start, even if you got to be a surrogate father to that child. There are men who are godly men in church that can become mentors to children who don't have fathers in their house. Why is that important? Do you realize that over the last 30 years, 60+% of the children that are being born are being raised by a single parent? 60+% of the children are being raised by a single parent. It wasn't meant to be that way. And that's why real men need to stand up. We need to stop. Men, we need to step back and say, I'm not going to be nobody's sperm bank. I'm not going to let you compromise me out like that. I'm not going to let you put me in a position where I cannot help raise my child. And if men start to take that position, then women might stop saying all I need is a sperm bank. I was watching a famous comedian the other night. Famous comedian. I don't remember her name, but she played on that movie when the girls came to the Essence Festival. Not Jada Smith or Tiffany Hash. And she was on the talk show that comes on at 10:30 at night. You like to watch it all the time. And she was sitting down there, she was talking to me. She said something that, she said it jokingly, but there was essence to it. She said, let me tell you something. She said, I don't need no man no more. She said, matter of fact, I get me a nice, big, furry, thick blanket. Now, this is on national TV. It is not on HBO. This is on CBS. She said, I get me a nice, big, furry blanket. And I go in my closet, and I get the men's cologne, and I spray it all over the blanket. And she says, I sort of put the blanket on the end of the sofa, and I sort of cuddle up under it. And I get nice and warm under it. She said, then I reach over there, and I grab a you-know-what, and I throw some batteries in it. And that's the end of the story. And she said, I don't need no man. Think about that. Women are saying to us as men, I don't need no man. Because you're not providing for me. You're not sensitive to me. You're not helping me to raise my children. Understand the essence of what that comedian was saying. You see, in comedy, the funniest joke comes from reality. Do you realize that? You know why it's so funny to you? Because it's real. But they're saying it in a humorous way, but it reflects reality. What this lady is saying is that I don't need no man. And that's why God is saying, will a real men please stand up? Stand up and be counted. It's our responsibility to provide for the child. It's our responsibility to protect the child. It's our responsibility to instill godly principles in that child. You heard what Joshua said? He said, that's for me and my family. He didn't say, I'm going to serve the Lord. He says, for me and my family. That family unit that God has created. He's saying to you and I, men, it's time for us to stop being sperm banks. Because the ladies are now getting to the point saying, I don't need you. There are artificial means for me to get what I need to get without you. Yeah. I can get the cologne and the blanket and everything else and take care of my physical needs. So why should I allow you to disrupt my life 24/7? You leave home in the morning, you come back 9 o'clock at night, and you expect me to shut down and deal with you. No. God is saying, real men, it's time for you to stand up. It's time for you to deal with the stability, the protection, the sensitivity, the nurturing, the love, the appreciation. It's time for us to start to demonstrate what does it really mean to be a man. Not just cracking jokes all the time. Cracking jokes are good, making people laugh is good. But it's time to start to do those things that God has given us to do that only the man can do. You see, I can sit down and talk and listen to my daughter and feel her hurt and hear her hurt and touch her the way her mom can't do. Yeah. Yes. A man has that capacity because of the way God made us, because of how those biological changes happen in the womb. Men are supposed to be sensitive to those kind of things. Notice that child, that girl, when she's hurt, when she's devastated, she want to reach out to her father. What if the father's not there? What if the father's not there? What if the father's not there to cuddle her and hold her and say, baby, everything's going to be all right. You don't have to be concerned about this knucklehead. Because you know what? Daddy showed you how a woman should be treated. A woman should be acknowledged. A woman should be revered. A woman should always be lifted up because she's the cradle of humanity. And so God is saying to you and I, it's time for the men to stand up. It's time for men to start being men. It's time to put away childish things. You make $2,000 a month. You take $600 and go deal with your outside female friend. You pull in $600 from your household. That extra money could buy books or do something for your children. He's saying to you and I, it's time to get away from just watching ESPN. How many football games can you watch? How many baseball games can you watch? He's saying it's time to stop surfing on the internet at nighttime for things that you shouldn't be looking at. You should be looking at things that's going to enhance you. It's going to make you better. That's going to make your family better. God is telling you and I, he's calling men to stand up. He's saying to us that we need to become parents. We need to start participating in a church. You know, I was going out with this girl. Just give me a few minutes, bro. I was going out with this girl. I remember this. I was younger. And I was excited about the date. I was ready to get down. But when I knocked on that door, I'll never forget this. That man stopped what he was doing. And he came up there and he said, son, who are your parents? I said, Thomas and Celestine Jones. So they live right around the corner. He said, I think I know your dad. He said, where you go to church at? I stumbled. Blah, 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 blah. He said, okay, where y'all going to eat at? I told him I think we were going to Pizza Hut or something like that. He said, well, where y'all going bowling at? I said, we're going right down there to the bowling alley. He said, what time are y'all leaving? Maybe about 9:30. And he said something to me that has always stuck with me. He said, son, let me explain something to you. I don't mind you taking my daughter out bowling. I don't mind you going eating with my daughter. But let me help you understand something. To see the way you took her away from here is the way you need to bring her back. Now that was profound. There are not enough fathers telling these young guys, the way you take my daughter away from here is the way you need to bring her back. Because if you bring her back differently, we're going to have a fundamental problem. We're going to have a lack of understanding. You would have demonstrated to me that we have had a failure to communicate. That's the essence that a father can do. You can't expect the mother to do that. You can't put that kind of pressure on that mother. So God is telling you and I, we need to learn how to become a man. And that's developing spiritual discernment. That's the ability to pray and talk with God. You see, when we start praying and talk with God, he's going to open up doors that we never dreamed possible. When we start worshiping God, he's going to introduce us to circumstances, events, and people that we never dreamed possible. When we start to allow God to be present in our lives and realize that God isn't silent, he's talking all the time. We as men are not hearing him because we have impure things in our heart. We have things that we're doing that's not consistent with a good, solid relationship with God. Now, we're all going to make mistakes. I make mistakes. I even make mistakes today. God isn't asking us to be perfect. He's asking us when we are out of balance, come to him, seek guidance, seek discernment. He's saying to you and I, be open to spiritual discernment, which is going to open up doors for you that you never dreamed possible. Isn't that wonderful? You see, God is wanting, as men, God wants to equip you, and God wants to equip me. And God is saying to you and I know you're going to mess up. I know you're not perfect. I know you're going to make mistakes. But I'm a loving, caring God that will allow you to make those mistakes. But God is saying to you and I'm not going to continue to allow you to destroy the family. Because you're letting Satan use you as an instrument. No man should have a child with a woman if you don't want to take the responsibility of raising that child. So God is saying to you and me, it's time for real men to stand up. It's time for real men to stop acting like children. It's time for real men to stop thinking like children. It's time for real men to put away childish things. It's time for real men to start acting as men. And when we start acting as men, and we start nurturing and maturing these children, you're going to find all the things that we see as going on that's bad. We're going to find that when we start teaching these young boys forgiveness, they're not going to have to pull out a gun and shoot somebody. When we start teaching them purity, they're going to bring that girl home the way they took her. When we start teaching them holiness, they're going to know that Jesus is a God that loves them, that Jesus is a God that will open up doors that they never dreamed possible. And you know what's going to happen? We're now starting to plant the Spirit of God in them. And that's why God is saying to you and me, men, it's time to stand up. Men, it's time to start showing love. It's time to start being sensitive. It's time to start providing. He's saying to you and I, men, if you cry out to me, all those abominations that you see going on around you, I'm going to let it pass over you. It's going to pass over you. It's going to pass over you, and the devourer will not get you. God is saying, I love you. Love yourself. He's saying, man, love yourself. Love yourself To say I'm no longer going to be a sperm bank. That's out. I want to participate in a family. I want to be the head of my family. I want to be able to say, as for me and my family, we're going to serve the Lord. And that's why God in this generation is calling for men to stand up and be men. And let me say something to women. You need to say to yourself, God made me beautiful. God gave me things that he gave to nobody else. And I'm not going to settle for nothing less or nothing second best. And when men start to stand up and say, I'm no longer going to be a sperm bank, and women start to stand up and say, I'm not going to settle, watch the change that happens. Do you receive that message? A few claps today. Sometimes we got to go off the reservation and deal with things that we don't want to deal with. See, if we can't deal with this stuff in the church, where are we going to deal with it? Ask yourself that question. If you can't deal with it in the house of God, where are you going to deal with it? Now, I don't want anybody to leave from here today saying that God, we preached a good message or we preached a bad message. I want you to accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, profess it with your mouth and believe it with your heart. You know what happens? When you do that, you're saved. You are saved.
You have been listening to Pastor Donald R. Jones of Bethesda Household of Prayer. We hope the word was nourishing to your soul and gave you a better understanding of God's love and grace. We want to encourage you to get into a Bible-based teaching church. And if you are in the New Orleans area, visit us at 7601 Westbank Expressway, Marrero, Louisiana. Thanks to you and your financial support, thousands have heard today's message. If you'd like to receive a copy of today's message, we can be reached at 504-348-0132. We are Bethesda Household of Prayer. Jesus loves you, and so do we. Join us next time, and be blessed.